Okay, we're going to move on to the second reason for the cause of the Cold War. At this point, I must also emphasize it is not just these that you need to listen to, but you must also refer to the textbook as well for additional information which I might have missed out. For example, in the previous reason, right, when we were looking at ideological differences um, that caused the two superpowers, USA and USSR, to inherently clash with one another. There's one particular part in the textbook. Okay, if you look at your textbooks now, page 4 at the bottom part, it tells us that during the Russian Civil War, which took place, I think if I'm not wrong, is 1919 or 1917, the USA actually joined in on the anti-communist forces, okay, or more commonly known as the Whites, in this Russian Civil War, and that contributed to the distrust between the two sides. So this historical event that took place, it has also contributed to the distrust of the communists of the USA. So basically, the communists were pissed off lah, that the Americans actually decided to intervene in this Russian Civil War. If you do not know what's a civil war, please go find out. We will be looking at Civil War in the next chapter as well, under Korean War. Okay. Now, the second reason that we're moving on to is a necessary alliance with continued distrust during World War II, which means to say after that events of distrust during the Russian Civil War and the ideological differences stemming from USA and democracy versus USSR's communism, they sort of took a break during World War II when they had a common enemy, that is Germany. Okay, and this one we learned all about it in, you should have learned all about it in last year's syllabus. Okay. Alright, so the alliance to resist German advance in Britain and the Soviet Union. Basically, Hitler was the main guy that they wanted to get rid of. He managed to piss off the rest of the entire world, except for his allies such as Japan. And most of the forces, okay, this one is going back into, I think if I'm not wrong, chapter 4 and chapter 5 last year, right? Okay, by 1941, most of Europe had fallen to German army except for Britain. In the Battle of Britain, they managed to hold on. I think that was in chapter 5. And Hitler actually broke the Nazi-Soviet pact. If you do not know what's the Nazi-Soviet pact, again, please go and revise. He broke the Nazi-Soviet pact to invade Soviet Union. And if you did not know about this, it was the cold, harsh winter of Russia that actually made Hitler fail to actually properly invade Soviet Union. But when he decided to break the Nazi-Soviet pact and invade Soviet Union anyway, it pissed off Stalin, and Stalin decided to form an alliance with Britain to prevent the Soviet Union from falling to Germany. And if Stalin is forming an alliance with Britain, which means to say that they are also forming an alliance with the USA at this point in time. So therefore, this factor here, right, it tells us of the temporary break between, if there were any in the first place, lah. I'm not saying that the Cold War started even before World War II, but any kind of distrust, any kind of dislike for each other took a break in World War II when Hitler was a common enemy and they needed to get rid of them. Okay, so this tells us of how Hitler in Germany managed to invade most of Europe, and he advanced in the Soviet Union at this point in time, and he was almost trying to conquer everything, but he couldn't, and he was stopped. Now I'm showing you the map here because this is important for you to know what's going on. Okay, so for Hitler, he has actually conquered these countries, right? And while he was attacking Soviet Union, even though just now I mentioned that it was the cold, harsh winters that actually defeated his troops, right? Stalin was panicking when Hitler first invaded Soviet Union. So he was wondering what he was supposed to do, and he wasn't prepared for the invasion because of the Nazi-Soviet pact. I mean, he knew that Hitler was going to invade, but he didn't expect it to be so soon, and so he was totally unprepared. And he needed the help of Great Britain here, and as well as USA lah, to come in and basically help Soviet Union out a bit. Now, how are they going to help Soviet Union is actually to attack Hitler from this side, or rather through France lah. Okay, so when the Allies managed to attack invade Hitler from this side, what Hitler is going to do, he's going to direct his attention from the right side over to the left side. So the technical term for this, right, is the opening of a second front. Okay, so the second front being the one over here, the first front being here. The opening of the second front, right, would actually ease the pressure on Soviet Union because Hitler's attention would be directed over to the other side. Now, Stalin has actually requested for this second front long ago, but the second front was only opened in June 1944, and that's actually the very significant day called D-Day. If you can see this small little figure here. Okay, 6th of June 1944 is the day in which they landed on the beaches of Normandy, that is in France, and then they started pushing the German troops back and eventually winning the war. Okay, so when the second front was delayed, right, what it actually caused was Stalin to be suspicious. Okay, he was thinking that, hey, why are these guys not actually starting the second front? It could be that the Allies were actually waiting for Germany and Soviet Union to fight and destroy each other and therefore minimize their losses. So that was Stalin's perception of how it happened. But why the second front was delayed was because the Allies wanted to be absolutely sure of the invasion before they went ahead. Which means to say there was a lot of time and effort being put into the preparation for the attack before they decided to open the second front in France. And that, according to my limited knowledge of the issue, it can be considered quite true lah. Whether or not they delayed it purposely, we can't really know for sure. Okay. So right, this contributed to the distrust between Stalin, representative of the communists, and the rest of the entire democratic side of things. So after the war, right, now this is going to get a bit confusing here. There are going to be quite a few terms that you need to know. Yalta Conference happening after World War II. No, sorry, I stand corrected. Yalta Conference happened before the end of World War II. It was towards the end already, and the Allies basically knew that they were going to win. So, being the arrogant idiots that they are, they started a conference to discuss what is going to happen after World War II. This is very similar, if you recall, to the very first chapter last year that we learned about the Paris Peace Conference after World War One. So basically, after the war ends, you have to hold a conference. You decide who is the winner, who's the winners and losers are decided. Then we decide what happens to the losers and what do the winners actually get. So at the conference, every country would have their own interests at stake, and for Stalin and the rest of them, it's no difference. Stalin is concerned about the future and security of the Soviet Union. This one you would come up again, I think in the third or fourth lecture, okay? You're going to see that. Winston Churchill, okay, Winston Churchill here, he wanted to have a close relationship with the USA to deter the rise of Soviet Union. Basically for him, right, he's the Prime Minister of Britain, by the way. He knew that Britain is going to be a losing world power already. They're no longer a world power by the time of end of World War II. And they recognize that USA is going to be taking over their position as the new world power. And so therefore they wanted to be buddy-buddy good friends with USA so that they can actually prevent communism from rising. Roosevelt, he needed Soviet Union to fight Japan because, like I mentioned, Yalta Conference happened before the proper end of World War II, and therefore he needed Stalin's help to actually fight Japan. At that point in time, they didn't know that they were going to use the atomic bomb, so therefore he felt that he needed Russian forces, and there are a lot of them. Manpower-wise, Stalin has a lot, so that's why Roosevelt, the US president, wanted Soviet Union's help to fight Japan to end the war in the Asia Pacific. Therefore, he was more inclined to actually give in to Stalin and his request at the Yalta Conference. Okay. Now, what happens next at the Potsdam Conference? This is after Germany's surrender. Between Yalta and Potsdam, okay, the relations between the two superpowers continue to worsen. This particular incident here, okay, elections in Poland, what was agreed at the Yalta Conference was that actually Stalin was supposed to hold elections in Poland and allow, democracy to take place. You can choose your own leader. But what happened was that Stalin arrested the non-communist leaders and set up a communist government in Poland. This particular event is very, very significant. Hold on. Okay, this particular incident, the Katyn massacre, happened in 1940. Katyn is somewhere in Poland. and this is where Stalin actually executed a whole bunch of Polish nationals, and it was quite a big deal because there were quite a lot of people who actually were killed and murdered. Now, this particular incident, right, already strained the relationship between Poland and Soviet Union, and that also that in the Nazi-Soviet pact, right, they actually Stalin and Hitler actually decided to divide Poland equally into two. So, for the Polish people, they definitely do not actually approve of communism, and they do not like Stalin. So coming back here, you can actually imagine that when Stalin sets up the Polish communist government, it was definitely by force and not something willing on the part of the Polish people. Okay, and also at the Potsdam conference, by then I already mentioned before that the atomic bomb actually was not ready yet at the Yalta conference. So by the Potsdam conference, it was ready, and they no longer needed Soviet Union's help. So you can just imagine the change in the attitude of the USA from the Yalta conference to the Potsdam conference. And also, there is a difference in the leadership of America. In the Yalta conference, it was this gentleman in the middle. If you can look at his face, he looks damn sick. Actually, he's going to die soon, and he does die, Roosevelt. And the next person who takes over him is Harry Truman. And this is the gentleman in the middle. He's the one who takes over, and his attitude towards communism was a bit more firm. Okay. So this point, last point here, is going to come up again as you will look at Stalin's actions next, and what did he actually do to ensure the safety and security of Soviet Union. Okay, and one last thing about the atomic bomb. So USA dropped the atomic bombs on Japan in August 1945. The significance of this is that actually it showed that the USA had an advantage over the Soviet Union, because basically they're just going to show that in the Soviet Union's face and say, hey, look, we have the bomb. You don't. You try anything funny, we're going to bomb you with this atomic bomb. And of course, similarly, the Soviet Union were not aware of how many bombs that the USA possessed. And we all know that they only had two at that point in time when they dropped both of them on Japan. Of course, they have the point here is also that they have the capability to build more, and they can use that to threaten Soviet Union um, in any way that they desire to. So in the post-war negotiations, they want to use this as a leverage for themselves. Okay, that they want to, whether is it to destroy communism, to undermine them in any way, this would be their leverage. Okay, so this particular factor is on the continued distrust after World War no starting from World War II. Okay, all through until the end of World War II, and shortly after that, what happens and how did this actually contribute to the distrust? Again, at this point in time, I must also emphasize the factor about the distrust between the two of them and the lack of honest and open communication between them that contributes to the start of the Cold War. Okay, and after that, next, we're going to look at a few more other factors before this chapter will be done.